Hi, welcome. Thank you for coming. So this morning we have Brendan Bear and Carrie Walters from St.Amant, and they'll be telling us about their autism programs and changes they've made recently. So hopefully everyone has signed in, and if you haven't, please do so before you leave and grab a muffin or a cinnamon bun and some coffee. And for the people joining us on the webinar, if you have any questions for our presenters, please just type them into the chat box and I will read them out to them so that you can get an answer. So with that, on to Carrie. Thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting us to come and share the model changes that we're experiencing and have taken on. Just a quick introduction. I know Brendan's already been introduced, but Brendan is our coordinator of clinical education and training, and he develops and provides a number of workshops and training sessions for a number of families and community service partners and stakeholders. So I'll talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, if you like what you see, I can give presentations wherever.
Anytime, anywhere, travels.
Yep.
He just got back from Las Vegas last night at midnight as a guest speaker from a conference, so he definitely does travel to present. And I'm Carrie Walters. I'm the senior manager overseeing the administrative and clinical services of the autism programs at St.Amant. So I'd like to thank everyone for coming today to hear more about the autism programs and about applied behavior analysis. Many of you, if not all of you, I'm sure, are all too familiar with the struggles faced by service providers when we're trying to respond to an increased number of referrals and requests for services within existing resources. So I'm sure you can imagine this isn't unique to St.Amant Autism Programs. I know one of our colleagues from Autism Outreach is here, and we have very similar waitlist struggles. So it's definitely a challenge that we're dealing with here in Manitoba. Just out of curiosity, I feel confident that someone's going to know the answer to this question, but does anyone know the current prevalence rates of autism right now? Brendan.
I'll let you go.
All right, well, you can see here that dating back to 2000, the Centre for Disease Control and Prevention has published a number of statistics looking at the prevalence rates of ASD. Back in 2000, it was estimated at 1 in 150, and as of 2014, it was estimated, the published data were 1 in 59 children having a diagnosis of ASD. So although these data and statistics are based on U.S. results or U.S. information, we certainly are feeling the same impact here in Manitoba with regards to increases in the number of kids getting a diagnosis of ASD. So one way that this is directly affecting the St.Amant Autism Programs is with our growing wait list. So when we're looking at the increased number of children who are waiting to access our services, and we have a finite amount of resources that we're available to respond with, we're faced with a really difficult situation where we see a growing wait list, more kids waiting to access services, and although we want to respond to those requests, we need to think about a number of other factors, not just increase in the number of kids we can support. So some of these include our service mandate, which we're provincially funded to provide applied behavior analysis services to preschool and school-age kids with autism living in the province of Manitoba. So we have a responsibility there to ensure that we're providing applied behavior analysis services to the children we support. We also want to look at the research and the science in applied behavior analysis, which is guiding the best practice of delivering ABA services to kids who are accessing our services. There's an advocacy group, I'm not sure if anybody's familiar with it, the Manitoba Families for Effective Autism Treatment, and they've advocated since back in 1998 to access applied behavior analysis services for kids in Manitoba. And I'll talk a little bit more about some of the advocacy work and the impact that that had on the service model changes. But anytime we're considering making changes to our models of service, we want to reflect on the needs of the families and what the families are advocating and asking us to respond to. And finally, as I've already mentioned, and I'm sure all of us know, there's no new funding or resources available for us to be able to respond to the increases in the demands that we're faced with. So with all of this information in mind, in partnership with MFEED, St.Amant put forward a proposal to our provincial funders to ask for their support in making changes to our models of service in an effort to respond to more children who are asking to access our services. So our main goals today and what we hope to achieve is to be able to share information so that you can be familiar with the pressures that led to our model changes and the scientific process that we use to inform our changes. to better understand why we changed our models of service and to become familiar with what those new models are. And we feel that this is really important because we know that partnering with our colleagues and the other stakeholders, knowing and sharing information about service models really helps to inform families in a meaningful way when they're asking about services and wanting to understand what those changes actually mean for them. And in addition to that, Brendan's going to be talking about the history of applied behavior analysis and how it's evolved since back in the 1960s, and hopefully to help familiarize you with what we want to categorize, I guess, as contemporary applied behavior analysis, which is the way that we deliver services using behavior analysis at St.Amant for the kids that we support. So for those of you who have been there or familiar with St.Amant, this is our head office, our main office, and it's located in South St. Vital at 440 River Road, and it's right across the Red River. You can see the river in the background there from the University of Manitoba. So St.Amant supports over 1,800 individuals across the province, and they operate over 100 community locations. They also employ over 1,800 staff members, and in 2018 were voted recognized as Manitoba's one of the top employers, and this was for the 7th time. Now, in addition to the autism programs, which I'm here to talk about today, St.Amant also provides a number of different services, including a team of clinicians in our clinical services department, residential and medical care facilities, and community homes where people are living out in the community throughout the city of Winnipeg. So narrowing things in on the St.Amant Autism Programs, we support over 150 families, and we provide a number of different workshops, which I mentioned previously, to families and to community agencies and stakeholders. And we also provide individual services for children in their homes, schools, in childcare facilities, and in 4 of our classroom locations. And so we have 3 classroom locations that have been up and running for a number of years now. And tomorrow we're actually having our open house for our families at our 4th location. We're trying to spread out throughout the city of Winnipeg. I don't know if you can clearly see the map here, but down in the south, of course, is 440 River Road. We have a classroom located at our head office, and we also have one located in a school, a partnering school, just down the road on Minnetonka Street. We have a location just up the road from here at 910 Wall Street, and we're opening our new location tomorrow at 517 London Street. So we're hoping to provide services in communities so that families don't have to travel so far to access our resources. And this will tie in when I start talking about the model changes, the importance of being more accessible at each of the community areas for families. So I thought what I would do is share with you both a timeline and some information about wait lists and wait times and children at risk of aging off of our wait list. So along the bottom here, you'll see there's the dates dating back to 1998. And the relevance of that date is that was the year that the 3-year ABA pilot program was funded. And so as we move on, I'm going to talk a little bit more. I'll start presenting some data dating back 10 years to 2008. And I'll introduce those data as they start to come up on the screen here. So just to link this back to what I had shared about the Manitoba Families for Effective Autism Treatment, or MFET, they had advocated for ABA services to be available to families in the province. A number of families were paying for clinicians to come from out of the country, actually, because there weren't any clinicians available in the city of Winnipeg providing ABA services. So a number of families were actually hiring consultants, many from Minnesota, and paying their service fees to bring them up to Manitoba to deliver treatment. So at 1998, there was a pilot-funded program, and by 2002, the advocacy had continued to secure some permanent funding for that program, and that was when we received full funding for the preschool ABA program. So the MFET advocacy efforts were really focused on getting an established preschool program in the province, and by the time that these children were moving towards school-age services, they began advocating for school-based supports. And so in 2005, just like the piloting of the original ABA preschool program, there was an interim school-age ABA program that was introduced. And in 2008, that became fully funded as well. And the idea was that children would receive 3 years of early intensive behavioral intervention in the preschool service side. And once they transitioned to school, there would be a 3-year intensive behavioral program available to them in their school. Following that, MFET began advocating again because those children were going to finished their 3 years and they asked for 2 years of gradual transition supports. So it was very intensive for 6 years and then a reduced intensity for 2 subsequent years as children transition fully to school-based support. So this is the vision and this is how things unfolded. You'll see here on the, is there a laser pointer too? I'm terrible with technology, so I'm going to push something and it's going to, I was holding it the wrong way too. This is going to go well. Okay, so here you can see this is where the data are introduced. And I'm just going to quickly familiarize you with the data. So there are going to be 2 sets of data. The green will be related to the wait list. So every September, it's just a natural progression. So our transition time, children transition to school-based supports in September. So all of the kids who are in early learning services who leave to go to school, we end up having openings or vacancies in our early learning side of service. So it's just a natural progression. Anybody who's delivering services for preschool generally experiences that wave of transition in September. So the waitlist numbers are reflecting, after we've done the best we can to pick up as many children as possible in September, how many kids are left waiting for services after we've done that. The challenge here is that because our biggest wave of pickup is in September, generally those kids are going to sit and wait for another full year before we can get to them. So this becomes a risk when we have a number of children who aren't getting diagnosed for various reasons until they're 4 years old. If they sit on our wait list when they're 4, they're going to wait until they're 5, which brings us to our second data point, which is aging out. So our service mandate requires that we pick children up for services on the preschool side before their 5th birthday. So if a child sits on our wait list, they're 4 years old, by the time they hit their 5th birthday, they're going to age off of our wait list, making them ineligible for our preschool services. And one of the other requirements for accessing the school-based side of services is that they need to have access to our early learning resources. So that's the relevance of the data as I walk through here. So this is the consultative resource that I was referring to that MPAID had advocated for, and the funders had supported St.Amant in establishing consultative school-based supports for 2 years with gradual reduction in intensity. And you can see here that in 2008, although we had no children sitting and waiting for services, by 2009 we're up to 10 children waiting to access services. We don't have any kids at risk of aging out yet here into 2010, but as you can see by the data, we're starting to see some challenges. We have a number of kids who have waited now for access to services, and although by 2011 we didn't have any age outs, this is a quick indicator that we've got a problem on our hands about to happen. In 2012, the funders asked if we would provide what is called the parent support model, so a resource for families who are sitting on our wait list, waiting to access early learning services. The goal of that is not to provide any intensive therapy, it's to provide education, positive parenting program or PPP access, and to also provide individual consultation for families on 1 or 2 goals that are kind of the key priorities or the key concerns for them at that time. So fast forward and you can see that the problem has now become somewhat unmanageable. We've got our capacity in our previous model was actually 75 children at any given time that we could provide services to. So when we start to see wait lists of over 60 children, it becomes quite clear that if our children are accessing services for 2 to 3 years, we have over 60 kids waiting to get into service, we're never going to be able to address this wait list within the existing model that we have. So some model changes were introduced in 2015, and I'm not going to get into the details because the reason we're here is to talk about the current model changes, but a lot of them have been rolled into and absorbed into the model changes, but there was an effort made to address some of the wait lists. But you can see here, we now are in a situation where not only do we have the highest number of children at risk of sitting on our wait list, we also have the highest number of children, close to 30, who are aging off of our wait list without access to services. So I'm going to pause here because I've told you a lot about our history and the struggles we faced and some of the numbers that have pressed us to consider these changes. And I'm going to hand things over to Brendan so we can talk a little bit about what it is we do and what the services that we provide. And then I'll come back a little bit later and talk about what those changes were and share with you some information on how that so far has affected our wait list.
Great.
What do we do? So all these changes in the service models that we're discussing, we haven't talked about what we actually do yet, what the support actually looks like. So this is a good quote that kind of summarizes the purpose behind probably lots of the work that we all do in this room, right? The objective of intervention is to teach the individual those skills that will facilitate their development and help them to achieve the greatest degree of independence and the highest quality of life possible. What I really like about this quote is that it's not just about identifying challenging behaviors or just to identify issues and then to get rid of them. It's not about that. It's about identifying skills that we can teach to help someone reach their full potential and support them on their way. So I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes talking about kind of the philosophy behind contemporary applied behavior analysis, which is really rooted in an explanation behind why we do what we do. And this is true for all of us, whether you have autism or other differences in disabilities, as well as typically developing adults. So I mentioned challenging behaviors. It's worth talking about appropriate behavior and challenging behavior if our goal is to help children reach their full potential. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. When we're talking about appropriate behavior, I just have a list of a few things here, but this list can go on and on and on, right? Everything from independence and getting dressed and ready to go outside, answering questions in class, asking for help from the teacher is a very important skill. Social skills of all kinds, safety skills, play and leisure skills, which are often easy to overlook. Teaching kids a greater diversity of ways to play and find enjoyment in life. That's an important thing that we need to remember to do as well. Of course, challenging behavior. We've all seen challenging behavior, and again, this is a list that could go on and on. Everything from shouting and yelling and screaming to aggression in so many different kinds, destruction, self-injury being some of the most behavior to see and to explain as well. Disruptive behavior, and again, this list could go on and on and on. So if we ask ourselves, why do kids with autism sometimes engage in challenging behavior instead of appropriate behavior? I think it's an important question to ask ourselves, and so it's one that we're going to come back to. You know, for a child who's learning appropriate ways to get their needs met, they're learning to raise their hand, they're learning to ask nicely, and so on. What's going to cause a child like that? Why are they going to tilt one way or the other towards challenging behavior or appropriate behavior at any particular time? And so there's lots of different explanations out there. I'm sure you've seen all of these. I've seen all of these and more. Everything from, you know, my child screams in class because autism makes him behave that way, right? Or she's doing really well because she's got a strong work ethic. That explains why she's picked up these communication skills. Or so-and-so got a head start in life and that's why they're doing well. Maybe there's a lack of discipline at home and that explains it. High IQ, this explains why Tom is picking up all these social and academic skills because of instinct. I'm not going to go into Indigo Child. Have you heard of it? Okay, cool. Anyway, because of the disability, because of personality, because of emotional intelligence, because they come from a good family, they have a good heart, trauma, spite, they're just waiting until I'm on the phone, and then he's going to yell just to upset me, right? I've heard that a lot. Because they're gifted, because they have low ambition. These are all common explanations for why we do what we do. And like every other list I've had so far, this can go on and on as well. And it's worthwhile pointing out that some of these explanations are more powerful than others, right? Some of them probably aren't super great. Other ones, and like IQ, trauma, we know there's tons of research in these areas, and so it's important to recognize that. Other ones, you know, are maybe a little bit more subjective, but they all have something in common. And so if you're a parent and your explanation for why your child explanations like IQ I find that to be a little bit disempowering, because what are you going to do about that? To change to change those things is very difficult or impossible in most cases, and they don't often point us directly in the kind of direction we need to go in to improve things. And like it's a difficult task to just straight up try and improve IQ or change someone's personality, right? These are difficult things to approach. So again, I find that they are often a little bit disempowering for people who are trying to support those with autism. So if I can summarize the human condition in one line, it's going to be an overly simplistic line, of course, but it's going to go something like this. We're all motivated to get more of the good stuff in life and less of the bad stuff in life. I mean, of course, that's simplistic. Human beings are more complex than that, but it's going to work to get my point across. When I'm talking about good stuff in life, we all kind of know what I'm talking about. It's different for everyone. Everything from popsicles and love and laughter to big things like meaningful work, commitment to something larger than yourself. One time I had this video game and I checked the high scores and I was 11th on the planet. That made me very happy. Not everyone's going to feel the same way about stuff like that. So this is unique for all of us, but we kind of know what we're talking about, right? And likewise with this other stuff too, you know, stubbed toes and cold fingers, nobody likes that. Meaningless work, hopelessness, and apathy. Nobody likes talking about cats. I wish that was true. People like talking about cats a lot. I'm not going to get into it too much. It's always the same thing. Like, I love my cat, but she always wakes me up at 6 a.m. She's so cute, and she tears up my shoes and things, and I love her. Okay. So it's different for everyone, right? I like house plants. They die a lot. It's sad. I still love them, though. So here's where we get a bit of a divergence. That, you know, when someone's actions and decisions bring them into contact with more of that good stuff in life, we can probably agree that they're on a good path, right? When their actions and their decisions are bringing them into contact with more and more of that other stuff, we can probably agree that they're not on the best path. So historically, here's where we can kind of get a divergence in how behavior analysts or behavior modifiers back in the day would approach the support of people with disabilities. So we know, they knew at the time that in the lab we have learned about punishment and reinforcement, right? Punishment leads to more and more of that of the particular behavior. Or sorry, punishment leads to less and less, of course. Reinforcement leads to more and more. If that's all you know about behavior analysis or about human behavior, then that can lead to some pretty rotten styles of support. It can look a lot like this, like things like this, things like electroshock, things like soap in the mouth, physical punishment, and things like that. A lot of really unethical and extreme forms of intervention developed in the 40s and 50s and 60s. And we've come a long way since then. An explanation for why things were so bad, I mean, the research into human behavior was still kind of just getting started. But more than that, there wasn't at that time any kind of ethical oversight. There's no kind of committee, no kind of certification that you could lose if you violated ethical principles. Of course, that has changed a lot since then, and I'd love to get into it a whole lot more. I have so much time. Now, if we behave doing things like this, we lose our jobs, and we are like cast out of the behavior analytic community. This is kind of what it would look like if your understanding of human behavior was limited to just punishment and reinforcement. Basically, when I see something that I like, let's reinforce that more. Let's give them Skittles and high fives and good jobs. When they're doing something bad, some kind of challenging behavior or more likely problem behavior, let's punish it. So when we see this, we will reinforce. When we see that, we will punish. And you can imagine such a simplistic approach to helping someone, trying to steer them on that good path, is not going to work. It's not going to work, and more than that, it can lead to a culture of care that's really unethical and really focused on a very limited way to help someone reach their full potential. I should say as well that ABA has improved significantly back since then. That's not to say that this kind of approach never happens anymore. It can still happen, but when it does, that's probably due to misinformation, misunderstanding, and or to like a lack of ethical oversight by people who actually know what they're doing, people who are certified. So back to this question, why would someone who's learning appropriate ways to get their needs met, but who might have a history of challenging behavior as well, at any given time, what's going to push them one way or the other? If we can really understand the problem, the answer will come out of it, because the answer is not separate from the problem. I love this guy. He's got a lot of really great words of wisdom. I think this applies to pretty much every problem in life. When your car isn't working right, you bring it to the mechanic. There's some kind of a clunking sound. They don't immediately replace the wheels or the drive shaft, or I'm not a car guy, I don't know what the parts are that they do, but they don't skip to intervention so quickly. They take the time to understand where that problem is coming from, where that clunking sound is, and then they go into that exact part and fix that exact area. And it's the same thing with supporting people with or without disabilities. It can be really difficult to figure out what the best explanation is for why this challenging behavior is occurring at this time or in these conditions, but it's worth taking the time and the effort to figure that out, because the closer you get, the more effective and the more appropriate your interventions can be. So I showed you all of these other explanations earlier. So there's lots of explanations, as I said, for challenging behavior, and some of them have more strength than others. And again, I would add that explanations like these, even though there are lots of research behind many of them, and no one can argue, for example, that the effects of trauma can be significant and can last a lifetime. But again, they're all difficult to address and change or influence directly. I can't reach into someone's head and pull the disability out, or crank up or down the personality or add some IQ points. It's not how humans work. So an alternative explanation that I like and that I find to be a little bit more empowering goes something like this. When people engage in challenging behavior, and appropriate behavior too, it's because it's the best strategy they have to get more of that good stuff in life and to avoid more of that bad stuff, right? If that's true, I'm going to say one more thing as well. For many of the people we support, it's not just the best strategy, this challenging behavior. It's not just the best strategy that they've learned in the short time that they've been on this earth. It's oftentimes the only strategy that's consistently worked. Yelling, aggression, screaming. Sometimes this is really the best way these kids have learned to get their needs met. And if that's true, then it makes sense that in similar circumstances down the road, they're likely to behave in a similar way. And so I like this explanation because I find it to be empowering. It's empowering because although we can't change the past, we can't change the person, we can influence how they experience today, and therefore what they learn and how they will behave down the road. And this is really the heart of our approach, understanding that the way we behave is the best we've learned at the time to get our needs met. And that learning never stops. There's always more that's going to happen every day. And so our job is to influence how people learn today. 8:40, right? Yeah, we're good. Okay. So in contrast with the sort of not ABA or the behavior modification kind of model that I had up there before, this is much more in line with how we operate today. So first of all, we take the time to understand the full context. We understand a person's strengths, their needs, their goals, their aspirations. We understand their family situation, their school, what different policies are, how we can support them the best we can, and we pay a lot of attention to the exact circumstances under which challenging behavior might occur. So that's the full context in which challenging behavior occurs. And if it's true that the way people behave is the best way they know at the time to get their needs met, then that's a meaningful outcome that they've learned to achieve that way. And in many cases, there's nothing wrong with that outcome. If you're having a hard time in class and you need a break, so you yell and scream because that's how you get a break. Yelling and screaming might not be the best strategy in the long term, but getting a break, that's an important thing. No one can argue with that. So what we do is we identify a more appropriate way for that person to achieve the same or a similar meaningful outcome, and we help them learn that skill. This is the gold standard, ideal kind of intervention whenever we have the opportunity. We other sort of models as well, but this is the ideal. And so in the situation where someone would previously engage in challenging behavior, maybe when they have a lot of work to do in class, a lot of demands, we are right there to help them respond in an appropriate way that still leads to the meaningful outcome that previously they only knew how to achieve through challenging behaviors. This is ideal. One last point before I hand it over to Carrie again. I said earlier that, we can't reach inside someone's head and pull out the autism or change the personality or add some IQ points. I'd like to say too that would we even want to do that, right? Are we in the business of changing who people are? And I would argue, no, that's not what we want to do, even if we could. To be yourself in a world that is constantly trying to make you something else is the greatest accomplishment. Ever since I discovered this quote, I have it in every presentation that I give, because yeah, we can't change who someone is, and I don't think we will want to. But what we can do is have an influence in their environment and what they learn, how they experience the things. So I'll speak to you again at the end, and Carrie can jump back on.
Thank you, Brendan. All right, so I'm going to introduce, just to kind of tie up the ABA part of the talk, the ABA process in a nutshell. And Brendan has captured, the importance of understanding the context in which behavior is happening. And what we like to think about is for each individual and each goal that we're setting, we want to go through this process to see whether or not what we're doing is actually producing a positive outcome. So the first step is to identify what we're trying to improve. We then want to make sure that we have a measure of what is happening right now, so we can see where the child's skills are at, where things are at in terms of the learning process, after which we're going to develop and implement some sort of systematic improvement strategy based on our understanding of behavior analysis and where the child's skills are at and what that ultimate goal is that we're trying to achieve. Of course, after we've implemented the strategy, we now want to take a look again and see whether or not there's been a positive change in the direction that we were hoping for. And then we ask ourselves, did it work? And if it did work, then we're going to move on to the next goal, and we're going to start back at the red box on the far left here, and again identify our next goal and go through this process continually. It's not always the case that it actually works, so we have to pause, take a look and say, okay, we thought we were going to see a reduction in challenging behavior, we didn't, or we thought we were going to be able to teach that new skill and we actually didn't. So we want to go back to that systematic improvement strategy and make some modifications to that particular procedure so that we can take a look and see if those changes actually resulted in a positive change in the right direction. And we continue with this loop or this cycle on an ongoing basis until we can actually answer that question, did it work? With a yes, it did work. Let's move on to the next goal. So I think this is important, and I'm talking about it at the level of the individual goal, but I'm going to come back to it after I share our model changes, and I want to think about it from a systems level in terms of how we went about making our changes to the models of service. Try this again. Okay, so we have, I'm going to capture the three new models of service that we have, starting from the time of diagnosis or I guess services or access to education at the time of suspected diagnosis, all the way through to high school graduation, which is our enhanced consultative services on the school age side of things. And I'll highlight some of the things that were changed in the rationale for having changed them as we go. So this is our parent support model, and I told you earlier that our funders had asked if we could make resources available to families waiting to access services. And so in doing that, we provided a series of workshops and access to the positive parenting programs. Anybody familiar with positive parenting program? Okay, the government of Manitoba has invested quite a bit in training people and making them qualified to be able to provide PPP training to families, and we offer it in a 5-week series so families can come and connect with other families, learn some skills and some tools, set some goals, and work through them with the support of a facilitator. Once families have completed PPP, they can then ask for a consultation from an autism consultant. So one of the key things here is that previously the way that the parent support model was set up was that we had 15 spaces, and so the first 15 people to be able to get through PPP could then access our services. But we offered them for a full year. So we set a goal, we'd get to the end of that, and then parents would think about what would they like to work on next, and we would continue with that. But with 15 spaces and 65 kids on our wait list, it really, you can see very quickly, we don't have the resources to do what we had been asked to do. So we've moved now, the key change here is we moved to a needs. The child's needs would be the way that we prioritize services. We would work on one goal that was the top priority for the family, and families, once they've achieved that goal or feel confident that they can go ahead and deliver or implement those strategies, we step back, let them do what they're doing, and if they need us again, they can reach out at any point while they're on the wait list. And again, based on their needs and the other children's needs, we would respond to each of the requests as they come forward. Now, this is where we see the vast majority of our changes in our early learning program. So this is an early intensive behavioral intervention program. And in order to access this service, children have to enter into services with us prior to their 5th birthday. Once in services, children are eligible to receive the service for up to 2 years or until the time that they turn 6, whichever comes first. So if a child gets into services when they're 2 years old, they would get 2 years of intervention, and then we would close them out for services. They'd be eligible to move on to our school-based services. The challenge here was that a number of kids, because they're waiting for so long to access services, they maybe get diagnosed at 3, they were turning 4, or they were 4 already when they applied for services. We get them into our model of service, and they are actually done at 5. So previously our cap was at 5, so they had to actually transition out when they became eligible to go to school. So a number of kids were not actually able to access our services for the full 2 years that we were offering them, because they were coming into us at 4, and they would get about 9 months, and then we would be getting them ready to transition to school. So part of the proposal that was approved was that we would be able to serve them until the September of their 6th birthday if they started services after 4. Not everybody's staying though, and we know that a number of kids are ready to go with their same age peers, and we're absolutely encouraging families to start that conversation with school, and we're supporting them in that transition. However, if they choose to stay and it's clinically beneficial for them to do so, then we are able to support them for an extra year there. Our service model offers 20 hours of support from a one-to-one autism tutor. Previously, that was at 31 hours a week. And so if we look to the research, which we partner closely with our research center at St.Amant to do an evaluation of the literature to make sure that we were within best practice guidelines. And even with our changes, the range of service ranges from 20 to 40 hours as considered best practice and still considered to qualify as an EIBI or early intensive behavioral intervention program. So we did make an adjustment there, a pretty substantial one, to go from 31 down to 20 hours. And again, this is looking at being able to stretch the resources and still being able to uphold that quality and integrity of behavioral intervention services. And finally, the next change is moving away from home-based services. Up until right now, and including right now, we're grandfathering a number of the children who we've made commitments to before rolling out these changes. So they are accessing services in their homes, but moving forward, anyone that came into service this September and anyone coming in the future will be able to access services at one of those 4 site-based locations that I identified, or if they're already registered in a childcare center, we're working in partnership with that childcare center to make sure that we can deliver the services in that setting. And I will just quickly point out that in rural communities, as you probably are aware, not every child has access to childcare, and we certainly don't have a center-based location as an alternative treatment location. So we are working closely with each family in those communities to make sure that we can identify a way to provide services. So they may continue to receive services in their home setting if that's the most ideal environment, with the ideal goal of working towards that group learning environment that we're trying to achieve. And finally, we have our enhanced consultative services. So this allows schools to be able to refer to us for consultation based on child's needs again. And this is available to schools up until high school graduation for anyone who's participated in our early learning services. And starting next September of 2019, we're going to be rolling out a home component to that. So if families are feeling like they would benefit or would like to have some support for some goals at home, we're going to be able to offer home-based consultative services through our autism programs. In addition to that, I'll just highlight that there's ongoing educational opportunities that are available. And these are a variety of different, delivered in a variety of different ways. So we have a fulfilling potential workshop series for families who are on our early learning waitlist. We have referrals from schools to provide in-services or workshops and training. We also provide training to childcare facilities at their request. And we've, over the last year, Brendan spent some time building a relationship with the Winnipeg Police Services and the 911 operators to provide training on autism and behavioral supports to provide a better understanding and build capacity within the general community. All right, so shifting gears here again back to the systems level version of that same process. So I just want to think about what it is that we've done here. We identified what we were trying to improve, which was to address our wait list and reduce the number of kids at risk of aging off before accessing services. We had some data that I shared, and I'll bring those graphs back up in just a moment. So we have a pretty good understanding of what's happening now in the province with respect to the number of kids trying to access services and waiting to get in for service. We've implemented a systematic improvement strategy, which is making all of these model changes to try and adjust the way we deliver services in order to respond to that problem. And then we have a measure of how did we do? Did we actually achieve what we set out to achieve? And obviously this isn't going to be a one-time situation. You can see the trends are changing over time. So we need to constantly be analyzing those data and looking at whether or not our changes have positively affected what we set out to achieve. And on an ongoing basis, if there's a change, what do we need to do to be able to maintain that response to families? So let's take a look again at the data. So you can see here, starting back in 2008, I had shared with you all of the data showing some pretty dramatic increases in wait times. We saw a bit of a reduction here, but we still see, so this was in 2017, and this is in response to some of those minor model changes that I was referring to before, but we still see a number of kids over 30 actually aging off, and this continues here. We have almost 30 kids again at risk of aging off last year. So had we not made the changes, this is what we projected to have happened and what the data supported this September. Had we not made those changes, we would have been right back up to almost 60 kids on our wait list, and we're maintaining that high number of kids at risk of aging off of our wait list before accessing services. So here's what actually did happen with the model changes. So we see a dramatic reduction in the number of children waiting to access services this year, as well as a dramatic reduction in the number of kids at risk of aging off. And I'll just point out that because we had commitments to our families that were already open for services, we haven't even fully implemented all of these model changes. We're still delivering a number of the services that we previously were for the families who are in. So as of next September, we're going to be able to fully roll out all of these changes. And our hope is that when we present these data again in September 2019, we see this number either stay quite low or come down, and that our number of kids at risk of aging off is also dramatically reduced. I think. So I just want to summarize quickly. We're very pleased that we're able to support a number of more families with our expanded models of service. We're proud that we've been able to uphold our evidence-based commitment to apply behavior analysis intervention. We're excited for the future because we believe we can continue to make a difference in the lives of people with children with autism in the province of Manitoba. And although our waitlists are not fully addressed at this point, these changes have already significantly affected a number of families. So in the area of autism services, I've come to understand that change is ongoing, and we're very grateful to have the process that I shared with you, that scientific process of being able to look at what are the needs in the province, to be able to assess the impact of the changes that we're implementing, and to have a tool to allow us to have ongoing measurement and to be able to continually come back and make adjustments to those implementing systematic changes and evaluate whether or not we're actually meeting our goals of achieving the reduced wait list. So I'm going to hand things over to Brendan and let him wrap up, and then we'll take some questions if there's a couple minutes left.
You can stay up here. You can stay here.
Okay.
It's not gonna be long. All right. So I think behavior analysts are sometimes criticized for focusing too much on the external observable environment and not enough on what's happening inside the people we're here to support. And I think that's a realistic thing to say. We do think a lot about the environment. There's a reason for that, though. When you hold something, here we go. When you have like a house plant at home and it doesn't bloom right, or it's not growing well, or it's a little bit stunted, do you hold it up and say, why aren't you growing right plant? Like, are you not smart enough to grow up, or do you not have a good enough work ethic, or is your personality just really sloppy? Or like, we don't point the blame inside the plant. Instead, we look at the nutrition, the light, the moisture, the water. We look at everything we can do in that plant's environment to support it as it grows to reach its full potential. And it's the same with the kids that we support too. We look at the environment in which they grow as best as we can, and that's where we can have the most influence, and that's where we focus all of our efforts. That's about it, eh?
Yeah.
So we have a few minutes for questions if you have some. Okay, there's a couple of there too.
Okay, so the first question we'll just take from the webinar. Somebody asked, since St.Amant has reduced the number of hours to 20 hours, would it be necessary or beneficial to hire private services for 10 to 20 hours a week to make up for the difference?
So that's a question that we actually have received from some of our families, and I know that as I've mentioned, the range of treatment recommendation is really between 20 and 40 hours. So I know that some families are looking at that as an option, and I mean, I can't recommend or not recommend increasing the hours. I think it really depends on each child's needs, and we're definitely open to those conversations with families as they're making those difficult decisions. Was that everything from the webinar?
Yes.
Okay, hands are up. Hi.
Are you guys at the St.Amant location for the classrooms have you listed those? Are there still kids on waitlist that didn't have services?
Yeah, so I just want to make sure I understand the question as well. So you're asking about for some of our site-based services if we're still carrying a wait list to access those services, is that right?
I used to be an autism tutor, so I was helping the kiddos in that classroom.
Okay.
So I was wondering if the waitlist kids are still getting like a half-time service.
Oh, are you referring to the pre-K model of service? Okay, so that was one of the 15 changes that I kind of skimmed over. As a temporary or interim solution to some of those kids that were aging off because our wait lists were growing and we weren't able to offer the early intervention service to them, we had a classroom model which was designed for 8 months to provide 20 hours a week of treatment to the children. With these model changes, we've actually redirected those resources to encompass all of the wait lists. So the funds that were set aside to respond to that have been embraced into the bigger picture with the hope of being able to provide that 20 hours for the full 2 years for all of the children on the wait list once we pick them up. Thank you for asking that. Hi.
What are some of the changes in school age?
Sure. So the question,
Yeah, I wasn't sure where that fit into.
Sure. So the question is just around the changes to the school age model of service. So previously I had mentioned that there were 3 years of intensive service followed by 2 years of graduated reduction in services. And the first 3 years were quite intensive and quite involved. This last model change in 2015, we had reduced that to 1 year of service. And at this point, we're grandfathering the students who are already accessing that 1 year we committed that to. However, moving forward, there won't be an intensive version of the school-based services. All of the services will be based on that referral process. So if schools would like our supports, we're going to support the child by transitioning with them to the school and going to hand off the information. If the school would like some educational or some consultative resources, we would be able to respond to that through our enhanced consultative service model. So what used to be 3 years was reduced to 1 year, and now we're shifting those resources into our early learning. So the idea there is that some of those funds are being redirected to that early learning model so we can respond to those waitlist needs while still stretching the resources to give everybody the opportunity to refer for those services up till high school graduation. Does that help?
The consultative model that you proposed in 2019, is that going to encompass then school as well as home? So families have issues at home, they
That's right.
have services to home, but it will be consultative services.
That's exactly right. Yeah, we've heard from a number of families that the schools are making referrals because there are concerns, but sometimes the family's asking for that resource and they're trying to access it through the school when there's really, sometimes those concerns aren't actually present in the school environment. They're doing well in the school, but there are challenges at home. So this is really to respond to those home-based needs, or if there's a challenge in both environments, to be able to support them across those different settings. So we will, right now we have the school age supports through enhanced consultative services, and next September, that's correct, we'll be opening up the home-based referrals as well. Thank you. Go ahead.
I was just wondering, so funding is a limiter for all of us in resources. And I was thinking about your waitlist. I'm not sure if Jordan's principle seems to have had much duration, but now it's had many durations. Is that an opportunity to develop practitioners or some someone who either live in the city or live on First Nations communities? Is that something you could tap into, or would that happen?
Thank you. So the question is about the Jordan's Principle Initiative and related to the autism services that we provide through St.Amant Autism Programs. The autism program itself doesn't actually deliver any of the services outside of the provincial services that we provide, but our colleagues in clinical services, there's a whole team of behavior analysts that are actually either being developed, they're working with the psychologist and board certified behavior analyst who oversees psychology services through clinical services, and they're providing services to the families who are living in the First Nation communities through the Jordan's Principle Initiative. So yeah, there is the intensive behavioral intervention program isn't part of that service right now. However, there are clinicians, board certified behavior analysts who are providing those services in those communities as well. Thank you. And that's not just specific to autism, it's really anyone who's referring for access to those resources. St.Amant is able to respond to those. Thank you. Hi.
Just a question, the workshops that are ongoing, are those all available online?
I'll let Brendan answer that one.
So, in particular, the fulfilling. Oh yeah, yeah. So the question is about the workshops that we provide, and are those available online? So in particular, the fulfilling potential workshops that Carrie mentioned, We actually have two streams of those. One stream is for parents that are currently receiving supports from us, and the other stream is open to literally anybody in the community who wants to attend. So I think the next round of classes is beginning this Thursday, I'm pretty sure. You can call us to confirm. I think it's this Thursday. You need to call and register. To answer what your question actually is, though, we currently don't have any of them online, but that is a priority well, it was a priority for 2018, but it's definitely going to happen like soon. There's a lot of moving parts that have to come together, but that's an important goal that we recognize as well.
Jordan's principal person from St.Amant, and again, some of the stuff I would really love to be able to engage, to be able to take with me, or have, in some cases, not always telehealth just doesn't work in the community for a variety of reasons. So I'll touch base with you guys afterwards.
Please do.
Hopefully brainstorm.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's hard to, it would be really great. That was a question, I'm going to try to repeat it anyway. To provide workshops and educations in remote areas is always a challenge, and to have this option of effective and quality YouTube or some other online method of providing information, we totally agree is a need that we want to meet. Definitely. Additionally, Carrie also mentioned workshops and presentations just in the community generally. I mentioned that earlier too. Anybody who wants a workshop can have one, and currently we don't charge anything. So spread the word.
Okay.
So thank you so much, Gary and Brendan, for coming and sharing all of this information, and for everyone who joined us here in the room and on the webinar. So hopefully everyone can join us next month in December. We'll be hearing from the RCC and SCY Family Network. They're arranging a presentation called Let's Talk SIBS, talking about how to include siblings in care that is received here at SCY Center. So there'll be a recording of this webinar posted onto the SCY website, so you can watch it again or share it with anybody who missed. And if anyone has any other questions for our presenters today, you could email them to me and I could pass them along and they could answer them for you. All right, so that's it. Thank you very much for coming. Hopefully everyone signed in at the front. So if you didn't, please do so, and please take some more muffins and coffee. Thank you.